I'm going to preach about Vikings today. But we started last week, we talked about demographics. We talked about the way that our community looks, the people that live in this community compared somewhat to the people in our church. And you've got today a snapshot survey. I want to invite you, please take a little bit of time, fill that snapshot survey out. You may be thinking, yeah, but Grant, I'm here for the baptism. I live way out of town, never coming back here. That's okay. Go ahead, please fill that out. It's a one Sunday picture of who is First Baptist Church. And so we ask everyone to fill that out. Again, it is completely anonymous. There was no way that we will be able to figure out who filled them out. Even if you put your name on it, we will black your name out when we look through these. It will help us, this year to look and to understand who are we compared to our community. But then in future years, when we come back and on the third Sunday of every October, we do this snapshot survey, it will help us to look at over a period of years, how is the church changing in relation to itself over the course of time. So again, if you would, we'd appreciate it if you would just take some time to fill that out. But today we're going to talk about reaching our community again. And we're going to talk today about the fact that people want community. Last month we spent 4 weeks talking about building true community. We call it the series, we call it the open door. The community at church, the open door. Well, for all those reasons that we talked about as a church family, that community, building real community is so important. The reality is, it is the same for reaching our community. It's the same for reaching those in this town that are not a part of any church. One of the reasons that people want to move to a smaller town is they desire the opportunity to be part of something bigger than themselves. When you live in a really large town, you live in a town like Denton, or a town where I had lived for the past 12 years, like Renton, 100,000 people. And you feel completely anonymous. You feel like you're just one little bitty blip in this huge painting. And that nobody would ever even notice. And you think that there's got to be something better. And then you talk to people that grew up in small towns. And they talk about how in their small town, man, they knew everybody. I used to tell people, when I lived in Renton, I'd tell people about growing up in Sanger, and they were like, that's weird. But I really wish that I had that. Because I would say to them, if I got in trouble at school, by the time I got home, the school hadn't necessarily called my parents and told them that I'd gotten in trouble. But everybody else in town had called my parents. And if I did something outside of school, if I was in town and I did something, by the time I got home, Mom and Dad already knew about it. Why? Because somebody had called them on the phone and said, hey, do you know what Grant just did? And people would go, man, I wish that I could have that. And so those that are living in a larger town, they start looking at Sanger and they think, we could move to Sanger and we could be part of something that's smaller, so that I wouldn't be as anonymous, and I could be part of something. And then they look on a housing website and they see the prices of our houses, and they jump up and down and go, I can actually afford to buy a house. And so they move here. They come here hoping to make lifelong friends, hoping to meet people that they can invest their life with, that will invest their life with them. And then they get here. And after a year, they look up and they look around and they say, I don't know anybody. Now, they might know a few people if they have kids that are in school or in activities. Once your kids get in school, there's the opportunity to meet some people, because you're taking your kids to football game, or football practices, or basketball practices, or band, or whatever it is that they're in, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, you can just continue on, and you're meeting some people through those events. But you're sitting with them for an hour, and then you're leaving, and you have some people that you kind of know, but there's still something lacking. Those of you that grew up in Sanger, like myself, You would think, I don't understand this being lonely in singing, because I'm never lonely. I know people everywhere I go. But you may think, if you grew up here, you decided to go to the varsity football game on Friday night, you would not even think about, who am I going to sit with? Is anybody going to say hi to me? Am I going to know anybody? Or worse yet, am I going to unknowingly sit by that guy that we hear about on a singer speaker, who yells and screams and screams at the refs, screams at the coaches, screams at the players, that I really just don't want to sit by? You don't worry about that, because you know who he is. And so when you walk up, you look in the stands and go, yeah, there he is, I'm going to the other end. But if you didn't grow up in Sanger, if you just moved here, and you decided, I'm going to go to the football game on Friday night, your first thought would be, who am I going to sit by? Because it feels really weird to go to a high school football game and sit down on the bleachers and look to your right, look to your left, look behind you, look in front of you, and think, there's nobody going to talk to me. Nobody knows that I'm here. Nobody cares that I'm here. And I'm going to sit through this entire game. And I may enjoy the football, but if my team scores and I want to jump up and high-five somebody, I'm going to jump up and go, nobody's here. And so what do? Most people just stay at home, because it's easier to turn the TV on and watch another game or a TV show and not have to worry about, am I going to know anymore? And so they get even more lonely. We as a church are called to reach our community. We read it last week, Matthew chapter 28. But today I want to just take a few minutes, and I want us to talk for just a brief time about some things that we need to do as a church. Let me read for you Mark chapter 1, starting at verse 29. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. And then go to Mark chapter 2, verse 13. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to him, and he began to teach them. As he walked with them, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." First thing I want us to look at is this. Jesus walked with the disciples. In that Mark 1 passage, you notice that they were together at the synagogue. They had gone to church together. Now for them, the synagogue wasn't just the place to go to learn about God. The synagogue was the center of community life. Everything in the community for them centered around and kind of came out of the synagogue and being a part of it. But I want us to think about this. Jesus, when he went to church, Jesus didn't go to church by himself. He went with his friends. But here's what's even more important. When church was over, Jesus didn't look at his friends and say, "Bye, we'll see you next Saturday," because they had church on Saturday. He didn't say, "Bye, I'll see you next Saturday," and wait until the next Saturday to be with his friends and those whom he was trying to impact. No. He went with the group of friends that he was training, that he was helping to grow. And after church, Jesus went with his friends to continue the fellowship. He went to Peter's home. And you notice that he goes to Peter's home, Simon and Andrew's home. You notice that he doesn't go with just them. They bring some other people along. James and John are with them. And then they go to his house. And they spend time together. People in our community that are lonely. They want somebody to just invite them over. How often do you invite a friend from church to your house for a meal? How often do you look around on a Sunday morning and see somebody that you haven't seen before and just go up to them and say, hey, we got some extra food, or we're going out to eat, we're going to buy you dinner. Would you come and have lunch with us? Or how about, how many times do you call a friend over when the Cowboys are playing? Or your favorite college team? Or whatever activity it is that you do. How many times do you get on the phone and do you call somebody and say, hey, come over and hang out with us. Let's watch the Cowboys together. Or let's just sit on the back porch and drink some tea and talk. How often do we do that? And we might do that with family. But how often do we reach outside of our family to reach into our community, to people that don't look like us, they don't talk like us, they don't act like us? How often do we reach outside of ourselves and invite our community into our house to be with us? Well, Jesus did it. Jesus went outside of himself and spent time with those whom he is trying to raise up and trying to grow. If we believe that Jesus is the example to follow, then my question is, why don't we do it? He also cared for the loved ones of his followers. When he arrives at Peter's house, he finds that Peter's mother-in-law is sick. And we don't know what she has. She's got a fever. We don't know exactly what it is. But obviously, Jesus comes in, finds out that she's sick. And I've always joked that, if you read this, it says he heals her and then she gets up and serves them. I always said, yeah, Jesus was sick, or he was hungry. And he knew mother-in-law would cook some food. And so you got to get mother-in-law healthy so she'll cook food. I don't really think that's what it was. I've joked about that. I think Jesus walked in and he saw that Peter is upset because his mother-in-law is sick. And Jesus cared about Peter. Therefore, Jesus cares about Peter's mother-in-law. And so he heals her. He restores her to health. When a friend is sick, do you bring a meal to them? To their family? Let me ask that question again. When a friend is sick, somebody outside of church is sick, do you stop and cook some food for them and take it to them? And you may go, Grant, that's not a big deal. You're right, it's not. Unless you're the one sick. And somebody calls and says, hey, I'm bringing over some chicken soup, some chicken noodle soup. And when they do, they bring it over. And they just give it to you and say, we care. We love you. And we just wanted to help out. And then they leave. There's something powerful about that. Just taking the time to bring over a simple meal makes a difference. People outside of the church, they hear of those things happening, and I'll guarantee you their response is, I wish I had that. They hear the response, they hear about us inside the church taking care of each other and loving each other and serving each other in ways like that. And then they hear about us going outside of that to people that are not really even part of the church. And then we do that and they think, why do they care about each other like that? And man, I really wish that I had somebody that cared about me in that same way. One of the ways we can reach our community is to serve and to love our neighbors. And that's exactly what Jesus did. Then in the chapter 2 passage of Mark, some of you may be offended when you read this slide. Let's go to that next slide. I said, Jesus partied with the disciples' friends. I know when I first wrote that down, I had to go back and go, wait, I can't put that up there. Because we think of Jesus as too serious and holy to have fun. We like to think of Jesus as too serious. He's too holy to do anything that's really fun. You know, we have this picture of Jesus because he's fully God, right? Well, if you don't think that God has a sense of humor, you haven't looked around the animal world very much. I mean, have you seen some of the animals? God has to have a sense of humor. But I think the reason that we don't like to say that Jesus went to a party is because we have allowed the enemy, our enemy, Satan, to take a word and to twist it and to make it mean something that it doesn't. Do I believe that Jesus went to a party? Absolutely. When they described it here as to what he went to, it was a party. They were eating, they were drinking, they were having fun. He went to a party. God is into parties. You go back to the Old Testament, and we read the festivals of the Old Testament. The Feast of Passover, the Feast of Tabernacles. Those are, we call them feasts. They are festivals. They are parties, and they were not parties that lasted for a day. They were parties that lasted for a week. They knew God knows how to throw a party. Jesus had fun. He laughed. He joked. He enjoyed himself. Here he calls Levi, also known as Matthew, to become his follower. And then he joins them at a party. Since Matthew was a tax collector, one of those sinners, the group that was collected at this party, they were probably not good church folk. And the reality is, if you read that passage, it's the good church folk that are mad. The good church folk are the ones that come to Jesus' disciples and say, why does your master eat and drink with those people? How dare he do that? Jesus does it because he says it is the sick that need a doctor. My prayer for our church is that the good church folk of Sanger will start attacking our devotion to Jesus because they see our church and they see the kind of people that come in and out. My prayer is that they would start accusing us of hanging out with the wrong kind of people. That they would even accuse us of watering down the gospel. And I hope that they are correct about us hanging out with the wrong kind of people. I pray for a day that people will talk about First Baptist Sanger and they will say, man, there's a bunch of sinners that go down there. Now, why do I pray for that? I pray for that because that means that we are doing our job of reaching our community. Because you see, as you start to reach people who don't have any church background, church experience, when they come into the church, we'll look at them and go, they don't really know how to talk right. They don't know how to act right. They haven't learned all of the do's and don'ts that we just know because we've been here for so long. And yeah, they might even cuss some. I honestly look forward to the day that we have people in this church that are not good church folk. Because that means that we're doing our job. Now, as we reach them, as we work with them, as we disciple them, we teach them what the Bible says and how the Bible tells us to live and to work and to live and to act. Yes, I hope that we see changes in their life. But I pray for the day that we are full of the people that the good church people of Sanger look down on. That's my prayer. Because they're here. That film that we watched, that video, we laughed at it. But I want to tell you something. There are people in this community that when they think about church, that's about what they think of. They look and to them, we are as foreign as a bunch of Vikings coming in. Because we have secluded ourselves and put ourselves in a bubble. Folks, we need to get out of that bubble. And we need to reach those and love those who aren't like us. Not so we can make them like us, but we need to reach them because it's what God has called us to. Let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, Lord, I pray that you would challenge each of us to live in a way that can help us to reach out to our community. Father, we know that there are many people in our town who don't know who Jesus is. Father, I pray that we would live our lives in a way that would draw them to you. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Let's stand together. Now, if God has laid something on your heart, then I'll encourage you to say yes to Him today. If that's to make this your church home, you may say, Grant, I kind of grew up in church.